We see number 10 on the news all the time, we hear the Prime Minister speak, but who really calls the shots in the UK? Is it just one person, a small group, or is it something else entirely? Well, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on the real center of power in the British government. Let's get right into it. So let's ask the big question right up front. Who actually runs the country? The UK has a monarch, it has a famous parliament, but the real day-to-day power, that lies somewhere else. And figuring out how that power works is the key to understanding British politics. And the answer to that big question, it's a group known as the executive. You can think of this as the government's command center, okay? It's where all the major decisions get made. And right at the top, you've got the Prime Minister and their top team, the cabinet, who together are steering the entire ship of state. Now, to really get a handle on how this whole thing works, it really helps to picture it as a pyramid. So let's break down this structure of power, level by level. Okay, so this diagram right here gives us a super clear map of that power structure. You can see the whole hierarchy, starting right at the very top with the Prime Minister, flowing down through the cabinet and the big departments, all the way to the agencies that handle the day-to-day government business. Like the place that issues your driving license. At the absolute peak of that pyramid, you have the Prime Minister. And listen, this is not just some ceremonial role. No way. They have immense power. They lead the cabinet, they can hire and fire any minister they want, and they can literally reshape the government by creating or dissolving entire departments. Just below the Prime Minister is their inner circle, the cabinet. This is a team of about 20 or so of the most senior ministers. We're talking the heads of major departments like health and defense. This is the room where the country's biggest, most important decisions are debated and ultimately made. And what holds up this entire pyramid? Well, that would be the government departments. Each one is led by a cabinet minister, and they're responsible for turning all that policy into actual action. Whether it's the Ministry of Defense or the Department for Transport, this is where thousands of civil servants do the day-to-day work of governing. So that's the formal structure. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Prime Minister has other sources of power that exist completely outside of Parliament. And some of these are ancient, historical powers that still have a massive impact on the country today. This might sound a little dramatic, I know, but just think about it. What if a prime minister could declare war, sign international treaties, or even grant pardons, all without needing to ask Parliament to pass a new law? It sounds pretty incredible, but they can. These are called royal prerogative powers, and they're exactly what they sound like. Historical powers that once belonged only to the monarch. But over centuries, they've been transferred over to the prime minister, giving them the authority to make some of the biggest decisions a country can face, like deploying the armed forces, all without a vote in Parliament. The executive has another powerful tool in its back pocket called secondary legislation. Now, this is basically a shortcut. It lets ministers change or update existing laws without having to go through the whole long, drawn-out process of passing a new act of Parliament. It's designed to be fast, but it also means major changes can be made with a lot less public debate. So with all this power concentrated in one place, you have to ask, what stops the executive from just doing whatever it wants? Well, there are checks and balances, and they all revolve around one core principle: responsibility. And this principle pretty much comes in two flavors. First up, you've got individual responsibility. This means a minister is ultimately accountable for everything that happens in their department. If something goes seriously wrong, the expectation is that they'll resign. Then there's collective responsibility. This is the idea that once the cabinet makes a decision, every single minister has to publicly support it, even if they secretly hated it in private. It's kind of the glue that holds the government together. And this isn't just a theory. Here's a real-world example of that individual responsibility being put to the test. This cartoon shows the Home Secretary Charles Clarke back in 2006. He was under huge pressure to resign when it came out that over 1,000 foreign prisoners had been released without even being considered for deportation. He ended up surviving the scandal, but it's a perfect illustration of how high the personal stakes can be for these ministers. All right, this brings us to our final and maybe the most important question about the executive. Who really holds the power within it? Is it the Prime Minister acting alone, or is it the cabinet as a whole? This is really the central tension of the entire UK system. So this is the core of the debate. On one side, you have the argument that the prime minister is completely dominant. They set the agenda, they're the face of the nation. But on the other side is the view that the cabinet is still a really powerful collective body that can push back against and sometimes even overrule a prime minister. So it's this constant balancing act, right? The prime minister gets their power from things like setting the agenda, being the main focus of the media, and from patronage. That's the power to appoint people to important jobs. But the cabinet is definitely not powerless. The PM needs their backing to get laws passed. And believe me, influential senior ministers can be a serious challenge to their authority. This whole idea of a dominant leader led to the buzzword presidentialism, which you heard a lot in connection with Prime Minister Tony Blair, who's caricatured here. Critics and commentators argued that his style of leadership, with a strong focus on his personal authority and a really powerful team in number 10, made him seem much more like a U.S. president than a traditional British prime minister. And that leaves us with one final question to chew on. When you think about their personal mandate from an election, the intense media focus, and the use of those special prerogative powers, has the prime minister effectively become a president in everything but name? Or does the power of the cabinet make sure the British system stays fundamentally different? That's the ongoing debate at the very heart of British power.